Tonight, Batman the Dark Knight does the impossible and makes Mad Hatter an actually threatening villain. All-Star Western has Booster Gold go full-on Back to the Future 3, and Teen Titans face down Satan himself in the battle against bad PR? All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 86 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and it is the end of WTF month, and gotta say, there are actually a few surprises this week. I was actually a little bit taken aback by some of the things that happened. I of course will not spoil that for you until you get to that point in the episode, but just make sure you listen to every single one of the comics so that you can find out which ones are the shocking ones. I swear I'm not doing this for audience retention purposes. I really do want you to get a good story out of it. But before I get into that, just want to point out for people watching the video version, which is available on the Comics from the Multiverse YouTube channel for those not in the know, you're going to notice about like halfway through, I stop wearing my trademark shirt and start wearing a completely different one. That is because I am an idiot, and I changed shirts to go out to dinner and then forgot to change it back when I got back, and I wasn't about to re-record 6 different reviews just for the sake of the shirt. So deal with that continuity blip, or don't. I really don't care. Anyway, let's talk about the comics that are coming out this week. This week we have 13 comics, including the number 19 issues of Batman the Dark Knight, Superman, Red Lanterns, Flash, The Fury of Firestorm, Savage Hawkman, All-Star Western, Teen Titans, iVampire, and Justice League Dark. Additionally, we have the number 10 issue of Batman Incorporated, the number 7 issue of Talon, and the number 3 issue of Katana. But out of all of that, the only one I really want you to pay attention to is iVampire. And I know I've said that month after month after month for about 20 months now, but this is the final issue of it. I need you to grieve with me. I need you to mourn its loss with me, because I can't do it alone. Anyway, let's talk about some Red Lanterns. Red Lanterns number 19, written by Peter Milligan, art by Will Conrad. So last issue we left off with Atrocitus being given the chance to live in a reality where his home planet wasn't murdered, and he turned it down, and so then he said, oops, I'm responsible for the death of my planet. Hey, all Red Lanterns, you gotta kill me. So this issue picks up with Rancor chasing after his quote-unquote girlfriend who's freaking out that he's a monster, and he explains, he's like, wait, hold on, seriously, I was like literally about to tell you the truth, and then Blee showed up. I'm so sorry, I'm a Red Lantern. And she's like, what's a Red Lantern? He's like, yeah, it's a long story. Point being is that I don't like being like this. I want to be the guy that you've seen me as. And she's like, here's the thing, I said monster, you're not actually that unattractive still. It could have worked out, but clearly you've got your own girl problems going on, so bye. She pieces out. He goes back in to talk to Bleeze, and he's just like, I think that you're just jealous that I made an actual connection, and I'm able to, like, not be filled with hate all the time. And she's like, okay, I actually feel sorry for you, but I'm gonna steal your blood because you can make constructs. Remember, that was a whole thing. And as she is leaping up after him, all of a sudden, Atrocitus comes over the rings, saying, hey, everybody, it's me, Atrocitus. You all have to kill me. That is a sacred order. You kill Atrocitus. And they're like, oh, geez, okay, that's kind of a big deal. So we cut back to Yzmalt, where Zilius and Skallix are talking, and Skallix is like, I mean, he's kind of the reason that we're all Red Lanterns. We're not, dead and at peace, so yeah, kind of screw him. But then Zilius is like, no, he's giving us the chance for vengeance. Like, I don't want to kill him. He's been a good dude, kind of. And also, I kind of worshipped him. But regardless, it is a sacred order, so they have to do it anyway. And then they make note of, like, wait a minute, hold on. Where's Ratchet? And Ratchet, if you remember, fell down into the planet and is meeting up with I think they're called like the four, I don't know. They're bad guys that Atrocitus used to hang out with. And they hear the message over the ring as well. And they're like, oh, hey, Atrocitus is going to kill himself. Okay, well, that actually works out pretty well for us. Hey, Ratchet, go do that. Like, yeah, we won't stand in your way. Go take care of your Sacred Order. Bye. So then we see Bleez and Rancor leaving Earth. And they're like, I mean, is Atrocitus suicidal? Is it a thing? Like, why is he all of a sudden, like, turning this? And Bleez is basically like, nah, this is pretty much on brand for him. Like, if he had the chance to prevent his planet's thing and he didn't, nah, he would totally kill himself. So let's go kill Atrocitus. And then we get one last shot of Dexstar, because he's been off maybe killing Stormwatch, but that's not a thing anymore. So then he hears the thing and he's like, okay, I'll go do it. So then we cut back to Atrocitus. His manhunters are there, and the manhunters are like, sir, maybe you shouldn't have sent out that order because you're kind of not in the right headspace right now. And he grabs one of them by the throat and tells him, like, nah, this is exactly what needs to happen. There will be no mercy from the Red Lanterns, and I am the one who caused all of this mayhem. So all the Red Lanterns show up at Atrocitus' position, and they all start attacking him. He's like, good, give me what I deserve, kill me. And they all start blasting him. And he's like, okay, doing a good, maybe just pump it up a little bit. This wasn't going to be easy. I am Atrocitus after all. And that's when they start throwing punches. And Atrocitus is like, yes, finally, I'm weakening, I'm dying. He looks over, he sees Dexstar next to him. He's like, oh, even you, Dexstar. Well, you always were an obedient kitty. Bleez comes in and he's just like, oh yeah, no, I'm totally going to kill this guy. This is totally cool. And even Rancor comes up and he's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe this is for the best. Someone's got to put him out of all that rage. And then Atrocitus just has like a switch flip in his head. And he's like, rage. Rage, that's it. I feel it now. And all of a sudden he starts punching all of the other Red Lanterns away. And as he's punching them away, he's like, Zilius, I can feel your rage now. I can taste it. And he punches away Bleez, saying, yes, your wings were clipped, and I can feel that rage. And Rancor, you got girl problems. I feel bad for you, son. So at that point, he punches away everybody, and he's like, I've done it. I can feel rage. And Scalix is like, okay, that's all cool. That's great. You told us to kill you as a sacred order, so we got to do that. And Atrocitus says, no. You have killed the old Atrocitus. I am the new Atrocitus. See, for millions of years, I have only focused on my rage. And Bleez is like, yeah, I've been saying that for the entirety of this comic. And she's like, shut up. Now I am able to feel all of your rages as well. I can become a new force of vengeance in the cosmos. But first I got to go kill the Guardians because we're coming up on issue 20, and that's kind of the end of Jeff Johns' run. So I'm going to go do that real quick, and then we'll focus on the new Atrocitus thing. Okay, great, thanks. So he starts to fly off, and then Zilius is like, wait, hold on. Can we come with? And he looks back, and he's like, all right, yeah, sure, whatever. So they're all flying off to show up in Green Lantern 20. And that's the book. Obviously, they were never going to kill off Atrocitus. As soon as they said that in the last issue, you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm sure that Atrocitus is going to die. Wink, wink. But, like, obviously that wasn't going to happen. I kind of like the Rancor plot wrapping up the way it did, where she is straight up like, yeah, no, like, you could maybe work out with me, but, like, I'm still not into it. I don't know. I kind of like the way that wrapped up overall, in that it wasn't a just thrown away thing where he's just like, why must I never feel love again? Instead, he was more upset at Bleez of just, man, you kind of suck. I don't like you. So overall, it's an okay issue. It does feel like they were just kind of like padding out the time. Like, the Red Lanterns don't have much of anything to do until Jeff Johns is done with his story, and then it's going to be like, oh yeah, okay, well, let's get back to that thing. Also, I forgot to say at the beginning, this is a tie-in to Wrath of the First Lantern. No, it isn't. Like, yeah, it's the fallout of what the First Lantern showed him, but, like, none of this has anything to do with the First Lantern. It's not pumping him up. It's not making him do anything. Like, the Red Lanterns have always been kind of separate from the rest of the Green Lantern books, but this issue feels like it may as well be set after the entire event because none of it matters. So, in terms of a tie-in, poor, but I do enjoy the issue overall. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it just a flat 7. It's okay without being great, and not much more I could say about it. Batman Incorporated number 10, written by Grant Morrison, art by Chris Burnham, Jason Masters, and Andrei Bressan. So last issue was just the mourning over Damian issue, but the big event was that Batman Incorporated has been more or less outlawed and Gotham is under control of Leviathan. So this issue picks up in some sort of cave, some sort of church, hard to tell, where there's a guy who's praying and he's greeted by Batman. His name is Michael Lane, and apparently he was Azrael. And Azrael was not a member of Batman Incorporated, or maybe he was. It's honestly, from this brief conversation here, it's hard to discern anything because they're all speaking in riddles. But they specifically say Batman Incorporated has been like liquidated, and I need you to be able to help me to prevent like Armageddon or whatever. I thought my son was going to bring it on. He's dead, so that's clearly not right. So I need to know what you know. And he says, I need your suit, the suit of sorrows, because it can protect its wearer from all harm. So then we cut to Ra's Al Ghul, who's in prison. Talia's visiting, and he's like, wow, okay, I mean, you're in your endgame now, and that's super cool, but I didn't expect you to actually kill your son. She's like, I didn't really mean to, but, you know, it happened, I'm just rolling with the punches. And he's like, yeah, no, fair enough. So yeah, you're in your endgame, you've done a great job, but you've overlooked one crucial piece of the puzzle. And Talia's like, what? No, I didn't. Shut up. What? And he starts laughing as he has a chessboard in his room and he topples the Red Queen with a Black Knight, and she just walks away angrily. So then we cut back to Gotham, and, you know, it's all the little news boxes who are saying, like, oh, the police and National Guard are powerless to act, Gotham is under martial law, it's under control of Leviathan, and Batman is a wanted criminal, as we see police officers destroying the bat signal on the roof. So at that point, the news is kind of turning on Wayne Enterprises a little bit because they're the ones who are funding Batman Incorporated. So Lucius gets in front of the TV and he's like, we'll have a statement soon enough. I'm sure Mr. Wayne will personally deliver that. But, like, number one thing is Gotham's safety. So we see Bruce and Lucius watching this at the lab, I guess, Wayne Tech. And there's something about a crystal that they are operating on called a photonic crystal. I don't know. But at that point, they're pointing out, like, yeah, Batman Incorporated wasted, like, a lot of money. Like, here are all these robots that we made, and Batman just kind of used them as fodder. So we've wasted, like, over $100 million on Batman Incorporated. And they pull off the tarp for something a lot more low-tech, more or less, but it's an exoskeleton that has injured all of its users prior to this, and Bruce is like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to... Let's go ahead and pull that one out. So then we see all of the guys that were shooting during the night where Damian died, they get chewed out by Talia for opening fire on Damian, and they're like, you're the reason he's dead, so I'm going to kill all of you. And one by one, Heretic just starts crushing their skulls and says, like, okay, Heretic, you keep going with this. I'm going to make a call real quick. And so she calls the mayor, and the mayor's like, hey, we've done everything you asked. Please just let our city go. And she's like, I mean, I'm kind of just doing the whole villain bit right now. So I demand that Batman surrender himself at 11 o'clock tonight. That's my final big demand. And at that point, we see Gordon trying to use his police cars to, like, get around the city and stop the crime and whatnot, but it turns out they were sold contaminated gas, so the police are off the table. We see Nightwing and Red Robin interrogating one of the members of Leviathan in order to get some info, and they know that whatever it is, it's going on tonight, blah, blah, blah. And they basically just chat a little bit about like, Batman's kind of not in a good headspace right now. You think he can handle this? And Nightwing's like, nah, that's when he's at his most dangerous. Of course he can. So then we go to Knight and Ranger, who have followed where Red Hood, a.k.a. Wingman, has ended up. And they see that he's being held hostage by Spiral and Hood. And they're about to reach into his teeth because Talia put a tracking device, a bug, inside of it. So they need to pry out one of his teeth in order to do it. And he's like, wait a minute, hold on, I think I know what's going on here. But then at that moment, Knight and Ranger bust in. They start kicking butt and bringing down everybody. Hood is like, oh yeah, guys, I was a spy the whole time. But like, we're all on the same side here. We're all against Leviathan. Go ask the lady in charge. And Jason chimes up like, yeah, actually, we need to listen to her. She's got important things to say. So then the police kick down the door of Kirk Langstrom because he's been working on an antidote to the Man-Bat serum. Mind you, he's not a Man-Bat at this point, which is kind of not in line with continuity, but nothing in this book ever has been. So he's just like, oh, I'm not working with Batman. I'm working independently. And the police were like, okay, well, if you see Batman, you better tell him we're on our way. And then one of the guys goes to look behind a curtain and Batman just jumps out, punches him in the face, and leaps out a window. So at this point, Talia is talking to her quote-unquote son, Heretic, and he's like, I killed the Batman. I want to be the new Batman. And Talia's like, you're a child, and you are like becoming increasingly threatening me. So I'm going to do the Suicide Squad thing. I've set up an electroshock inside your spine, and I can just trigger it whenever I want. So you're going to do what you're told and stop being such a little whiny bitch. So then we see Batman brooding, and he gets the whole year one thing. He's like, criminals are superstitious and cowardly locked. I must become a creature of the night, black and terrible. Yes, father. And he injects himself with a serum of some sort. We see him start to transform. And then the night comes, 5 minutes to 11. Talia is keeping an eye out on top of the Wayne Enterprises building. And she sees something flying in from the east. And as she looks out at it, she's like, oh my god, he didn't, did he? And we see in the exoskeleton flying in is a man-batified Batman. And he says, yes, father, I shall become a bat. I really like that little callback, even if it's a silly thing to do. I like the little thing of like, haha, I have become a bat. You see what I did there? I like that. Yeah, overall, it feels like the threads are starting to unravel on the mystery of it. Like, oh, okay, we're picking up, here's what this is doing, here's what that's doing. And we're starting to see where the end game's going to come in. But it's so slow-paced. Like, I get this whole thing of the city is under siege, but I'm not feeling that. It feels like the Bat family is under siege, and the rest of Gotham is just kind of inconvenienced. It doesn't feel like there's this big battle for the soul of Gotham. It just feels like, hey, Batman, you suck, and we just have done that for the past 7 issues. So I can't say I'm really enjoying it, but it is a grand story. I'll give it that. Morrison has a big idea in mind, and he's not letting anything get in the way of it. I just wish that it was a little bit more clean cut and not as... There's like 8 different branches going on in this story, different people we need to follow and keep up with their stuff. And as such, everybody gets like 2 pages. And then we see the next part, like the Spiral story and the Jason Todd being kidnapped by them, 2 pages. Technically 1 page, because the first page of it is just Knight and Ranger saying, oh, we're going to go save him. So yeah, I just wish there'd be a bit more focus on the things that are actually of substance rather than everybody getting pushed forward one space at a time. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7. It's fine. It's okay. You know what? 6.5. I changed my mind. 7 just feels too high for it. It's getting a bit long. And I know we only have like 3 more issues and then a special, but yeah, I'm not that engaged with it, I guess is the issue. And it's never given me a reason to be. So 6.5. Batman the Dark Knight, written by Gregg Hurwitz, art by Szymon Kudranski. So last issue, we had a whole flashback to how Mad Hatter started taking his pills to kind of not stunt his growth, and it didn't seem like it was going to end well. This issue, and Batman revealed his secret identity. That's kind of important. This issue picks up with Mad Hatter realizing that once they tracked down the factory, they were able to comb through like all the delivery records and stuff like that, and they can start narrowing down where Mad Hatter is. And he's like, okay, the cops aren't a problem. Like, we can easily deal with them. Batman's a problem. So I need you guys to find Batman. And he's talking to Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and they're like, how in the hell are we supposed to find Batman? He's like, we have a whole bunch of mind control things going on, and we're able to see through their eyes. So just have everyone keep a lookout for Batman, and we'll figure out where he is. So then we go back into the flashback where Jervis has started taking his pills, and his parents are like, we really don't want you to take these pills, son. And he's like, I don't care. I'm going to take these pills anyway. And as he starts taking it, his hair starts falling out. He starts having alopecia, apparently. And his father gives him the top hat, like the big top hat that is synonymous with Mad Hatter, as he's talking to the doctor. And he's like, look, yes, it's a concerning side effect, but we're more concerned about, like, what are the other side effects? And we see him talking to Alice and saying, like, you liked me. You told me you liked me. And she's like, look, things like, it wasn't like that. And he's like, you said you were glad you hung out with me that day. And he starts, like, almost assaulting her. He gets pushed away by some of the other kids. And he's like, it's not fair. This was taken from me. It's not fair. And so he keeps on taking these pills. And we see his rabbit that he keeps in his bedroom is just making, he's thumping, just making some thumping noises. And his parents are outside his door. They keep on saying, Jervis, come out, talk to us, we need to talk, da da da. And he keeps on taking these pills. The thumping noise gets to be too much, and his parents finally, like, break down the door as we see Jervis has destroyed his pet bunny, like, super dead. So he gets dropped off at the Arkham detention facility for the youth, and his parents just leave him there. So then we cut to Bruce, who's down in the Batcave, and he's trying to figure out where Mad Hatter is. And I keep on forgetting her name. Natalia? I think it's Natalia. Natalia goes down, and she's like, oh, hey, Bruce, find anything? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I've never had company down here, and it's weird to me. But yeah, no, this is a dream come true that someone's able to keep Alfred some company upstairs. And she basically convinced him to spend some time with her, and they go upstairs, and he's not focused on the mission anymore. Then all of a sudden she jolts up. She realizes she's supposed to go on stage in like 10 minutes, and she's like, I'll never make it down there in time. So he's like, oh yes you will. And they take the bat jet down there, and he lets her step off and goes on their way. Meanwhile, a janitor saw her exiting the bat jet, and he is under the mind control of of Mad Hatter, I should say. He reports it to the Tweedles, and he's like, okay, so she was being questioned or something. What's up? And he's like, no. They were like, smiley. Like, this is something else. And he's like, oh, okay, well, get me eyes on this piano player. And as he sees her, he's like, oh my God, she's perfect. She will be my Alice. So at that point, we see that Bruce put a little tracking device onto Natalia, and he is just keeping an eye on it, seeing that she gets home safe, seeing that her heart rate is still there. He's just standing there as like a guardian angel for her. And Alfred comes down just like, you're in love. You're in love, Master Bruce. And he's like, oh, is this what love feels like? So then Mad Hatter says, all right, everybody, time for the rehearsal. We don't have an Alice, but anybody will do. He picks out a random brunette and staples a blonde wig to her head, saying like, there, everyone else, I just want to make sure you know your parts. Our Alice will come on the night of. I dare not disturb her beforehand. So all these people just start leaving their houses in mass and arrive at where Mad Hatter's got his thing. And he calls action, and we see him perfectly trying to imitate that one day he had with Alice back in his youth. And at every step of the way, he's got little critiques. He's like, oh, the door handle should be lower and that should be taller. Say it with more oomph, your lines and whatnot. And he's also complaining to the actress playing Alice that she's not doing well enough. And as he's getting to the end of the performance, they get down to the lake side that they were originally ended their date at. And he says, okay, so you look out, you see this view, and you say, oh, you know what, Jervis, I wasn't sure I'd have fun, but... And then he looks at this Alice, and he's like, you know what, nah, screw it, I'm not doing it with this thing. And he pushes her into the pool and says, all right, everyone else, get in. And everyone starts walking into the water and drowning themselves. And he's like, here's the thing, we've got plenty of actors. I can easily get more. I don't want any of them. Screw them. They're all crap. So at that point, Batman meets Gordon up on the roof of GCPD, and he's like, hey, we got calls of a lot of missing people. And Batman's like, yeah, we know. We've been working on that, the missing people. And he's like, no. These people all just got up out of their houses and left in the middle of the night, and none of them have come back. And they're like different genders, ethnicities, kids, like all of them are gone, and we don't know where they are. And Batman's like, look, we might want to brace ourselves for what's going to happen next. And Gordon gets a call from some fishermen who see a body wash up on the shore, and then another, and then another. And Gordon just collapses on the ground, and Batman goes to investigate, and we see the entire, like, reservoir of Gotham is just filled to the brim with bodies. And, yeah, not a good time. I gotta say, this does probably more to sell Mad Hatter as an actual threat than anything else that's been going on in this story, because he's always just been like, oh, you know, I'm taking people and then they just come back later or they disappear entirely or whatever. But this is the first one where he's taken hundreds of people and just ordered them to suicide because of his mental instability. And it worked. Like, he did it. It succeeded, and Batman was not able to stop it. I think this is possibly one of the best Mad Hatter stories that I've ever read. I can't really think of many others that compete with it, but it's the first one that really sells it as the big threat. And I think that switching over to Kudranski's art for this issue really works best for me, because he's got just such this ethereal style, this darker, heavier inks, that it really sells the grimness of the moment. Like the 2-page layout where Batman and Gordon are on top of the roof, just beautifully done. Absolutely love it. So overall, I'm going to give this one an 8. I really do enjoy it. I think it's a super solid issue. In an already pretty good storyline. It's staying focused. It's staying laid out. The only critique I would have is that I want the exploration. The fact that you gave Batman's secret identity away, I want that to be explored a little bit more. I think that that's a big enough thing that it shouldn't be relegated to just like 2 to 3 pages in the middle. But because I'm also interested in the other story they're doing, it still passes with flying colors. So yeah, 8 for this, loving it. Talon number 7, written by James Tynion IV and Scott Snyder, art by Guillem March. So last issue, both Calvin and Casey were made aware via their own methods that Sebastian Clark is the member of the Court of Owls, and in fact may have been the man who inducted Calvin into being a Talon to begin with. So we pick up with Casey, who found out the news in Sebastian's personal penthouse. She calls up Calvin and says like, hey, I know you're not going to get this message till you're off the island, but like, don't let him know that you know, and I'm telling you now that it's a whole thing. We'll play dumb and then we'll figure it out. And we see Sebastian has found her there. He's got a gun trained on her and says like, oh, you've made a big mistake. And he knocks her out with the gun. Then we go back to Securitas Island, where Calvin is tied up, and the Grandmaster, John Wycliffe, I believe is his name, he just lays it down and he's like, yeah, no, he was the one who brought you in, and he was always like fixated on bringing you back, but like not everything he said was a lie. His father did write an expose book on the Court of Owls, but it was actually Sebastian himself who turned in his father in exchange for being able to join, and he worked his way up the ranks and he became our Grandmaster, and then, you know, the events of Batman happened, and now we're kicking him out and he wants back in. So at that point he's like, all right, well, here's the deal. we don't really need you. We kind of want you off the table anyway, so we're just going to go ahead and murderize you. And he talks to the little family line of Talons, and he tells the oldest one, all right, you're the oldest, go ahead and kill him. And then the youngest one steps up, Nathaniel. He comes up and he's like, no, I'll do it, Grandpapa. I'll be the one who kills him. And he says, like, oh, I'm eager to show them just what I think of the Court of Owls. And as he holds the knife to Calvin's throat, he flips around, stabs it into the chest of his grandfather. Wycliffe's like, I'm sorry, what's going on? I blinked for a minute, huh? And he lets Calvin break out of his chair, and the two of them go up against the remaining two Talons. And he's like, I always hated you, Dad. I could have had a son at any point, but you suck, and I don't want them to live this life. And he's like, you're a disappointment. He's like, I know. So they all start fighting. Nathaniel and Calvin are back to back, and they throw down some flash freeze ice cubes that allow them to basically freeze up the Talons long enough for them to deal with Wycliffe. And he's like, guys, you can't escape the island. What are you even trying to do here? He's like, oh, we aren't trying to escape the island. We're going to set off those bombs that I put in the sewer. And then all of a sudden the bombs go off. And he's like, you didn't know that in case of explosion, all of the computers are going to be wiped. So despite the fact you were trying to hack your way into them to find out secrets of this island, it's gone now. You can't have any of it. And he's like, that's a stupid security flaw. Like, why in the hell would he do that? And he checks the computers to see that it's true. And he's like, no, this can't be happening. And then all of a sudden an escape pod opens up, and there are literally like mechanical arms that come out of the ceiling and grab John Wycliffe. And he's like, get off. What the hell? What's going on here? And Nathaniel's like, oh, hey, an escape pod. Well, okay, we didn't know that one was the thing. Calvin, you need to take it, because like I'm a Talon. I can get out of this. That's no big deal. You get in there and you stop them. But then, of course, the other Talons have managed to unfreeze. They come after Calvin. And Nathaniel's like, oh, they're breaking free. I'll keep them busy. You get out of here. And so he fires off a grappling hook to grab onto the escape pod as it rockets out and flies off the island. Back in Sebastian's penthouse, he's got Casey in a special, I don't even know what to call it. It's just like a training room, I guess, for Calvin, but more specifically, it's the closet where they keep all of the handcuffs and other BDSM gear. And he's like, all right, here's the deal. I'm going to go ahead and lock you in this closet, and then I'm going to put you in it's like an iron coffin sort of thing. I'm going to put you in there, and you'll probably die in there because you don't have the escape knowledge that Calvin has. So go ahead and hop in. And he's standing in the closet as he's saying all this, and Casey's like, override, please close the closet. And then all of a sudden the closet door shuts. She turns off voice commands, and he's like, did you honestly think I was not going to have an override built into this place? Like, yeah, no, you're going to be trapped in that closet. And also it's airproof, so good luck with that. I'm out. And so we see Calvin. He's on the escape pod still. All of a sudden the parachutes open and he goes flying just because of momentum. And as he lands on a nearby building, he's pretty beaten up, but then he gets Casey's message and also hears at the very end of it, Sebastian knocking her out. And he's like, ah, crap. Okay, Wycliffe, I'll deal with you some other time, man. I gotta go. So we see Casey leaving the compound with her daughter, and they're like, okay, yep, we gotta go on the run again. And she's like, I don't want. And she's like, well, tough. We're doing it. Here we go. So Calvin's launching himself through Gotham, and then all of a sudden he gets bound up by some wire, and he's brought up, and wouldn't you know it, it's Batman. And he's like, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm not going to let Talons operate in my city. He's like, I'm not, God, why tonight? I am not a Talon. I am fighting against the Court of Owls. And he's like, yeah, I know. You're Calvin Rose. Here's your whole backstory. And here's the thing that you're doing. But the problem that you're doing is that every time you go up against the Court of Owls, you put innocent lives at risk. And I'm not going to let that happen. And he's like, I do not have time for this today. I have people I love in danger. I gotta go, man. And he's like, well, that's too bad, because you're going to be spending the night in the police station. And he puts some inescapable handcuffs on it where even Batman couldn't get out of them. And then he calls up a GPS pickup from the Bat jet. And then by the time he looks back, Calvin's already out. And Batman does an imaging search, and Calvin throws out some weird tech that messes with infrared stuff, so he's able to escape from Batman. He gets back to the penthouse. Sebastian's just standing there waiting, and he's like, hey, Casey's not here. And he's like, what did you do with her? What's going on? He starts beating the crap out of Sebastian. He's like, nah, she locked me in the closet and left. Like, she's fine. But like, yeah, no, I guess that you know everything now, huh? Yeah, I'm the guy who took you away. I mean, technically that was the recruiter, but I'm the one who said yes. And yeah, I've always been just trying to get my place in the Court of Owls back. And Calvin's like, okay, well, I'm going to kill you then. Like, that's just going to happen now. And at that point, Sebastian says, well, let's see what my new partner thinks about that. And a giant arm comes out of frame, punches Calvin in the face, and he's like, oh God, is this the Butcher again? Are we doing that? Turns out, no. It's Bane. Bane shows up, and he's like, this is the guy who was giving you so much trouble? And it's like, oh yeah, no, he's great escape art. Like, that's why it's so hard to kill him. And Bane's like, escape? There's no escape from Bane. And he picks up Calvin by the throat and says, like, well, let's see you escape from this. And he just cracks his neck and kills him. And Sebastian stands over the body and says, like, well, bye, Calvin. See you in the next life. That's the end of the trade, too. If you didn't know there was a second trade, you think, like, oh, the book was just canceled at that point. So, yeah, no, it's WTF month, and this is by far this week the book that gave me the biggest one, where I'm like, oh, he's dead. He's just murdered. Okay. And obviously Talons, in the general sense, have a thing of coming back, and the fact there's a second trade, it's not a hard leap to figure out what's going to happen next, but the fact that they did have the balls to just kill their protagonist at the end of an issue. Not a, how is Calvin going to escape this one? No, he's dead. He died. This is his death date. So I kind of like that. I also appreciate the issue is it finally had him interact with Batman. It had him not win against Batman, but just escape. I appreciate that they didn't put their protagonist over that much. So yeah, no, it's a solid issue. I really am enjoying it. Now that we finally got the reveal of Sebastian, like, hard and fast, I can see how we're not, I wouldn't say we're on the decline of the series, but I can see how we get a lot more focused in that it's not about the court in general. It's about just Sebastian right now, and then maybe other court stuff later. So I'm going to give this one, I'm giving it an 8.5. This is one of the few twist endings that really actually works for me, and I applaud it for it. So, really enjoying. Superman number 19, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Kenneth Rocafort. So last issue, a whole lot of, like, just beginning the arc stuff happened, and Hector Hammond is the villain. He's around and he's in Star Labs, and he might be in a coma. So this issue picks up with something completely unrelated. Superman is being attacked by a group called the Sunturians, I believe. And they apparently have red sun particles in them. They are just in the middle of Metropolis, and it's like, Superman, we thought you'd put up more of a fight. That's why we tried to draw you out in your own city. Why aren't you putting up a fight? And he's like, oh, look up there. And they all look up, and it turns out that he threw a bunch of water containers at them before the fight even started because he knew they'd have red sun particles. And so they all crash down on them. He uses his ice breath to freeze their, like, all of them in place. And he makes this weird justification that they disguised their ship as part of the city so that he didn't know when they showed up. So then he just lifts up this giant crater out of Metropolis, and, like, it's huge. It is I see the curvature of the Earth, and he just throws it into space. And he's like, well, that's a problem. And he then uses his telescopic vision to scan their mothership and says, oh boy, all this is so much. I'm going to be late for Lois's housewarming party. And it turns out that all that stuff that just happened doesn't matter at all because the entire issue is really about this housewarming party. So Lois, she opens up the door, and wouldn't you know it, It's Wonder Woman, but in her civilian outfit of Diana Prince. And she's like, oh, hey, Clark said to meet him here, so I guess I'll just wait around and see when he gets here. And Lois is gobsmacked because she's absolutely beautiful. Jimmy Olsen shows up. He's gobsmacked. Jonathan, Lois's live-in boyfriend, is also gobsmacked, and she's just like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go inside now. And she gets inside. She talks to Perry White, and everyone's just kind of like lightly flirting with her, and in Jimmy's case, really hard flirting with her. And Lois, it's like, oh, thank you, Jonathan, for having me throw this party. It's so nice to be here with all my friends. Then we cut over to Star Labs, and Hector Hammond is there. He is being looked over. There's a thing called Operation Mindstorm going on. And then all of a sudden, Hector's brain just goes flat. Like, there's no brain waves at all. And Star Labs starts freaking out. An alarm starts going off. And Orion from the New Gods shows up. He just blasts through a wall and says, oh, geez, that's a disgustingly large head. Anyway, this is not Superman. I'm looking for Superman, but this guy is clearly a threat. So I'm going to go ahead and just kill him here. And he rolls back a punch, and then he looks around, and he's like, seriously? Like, no brain bolt or anything like that? Like, I figured something would be stopping me. And all the Star Labs security guards show up, and they're like, oh, he's under Star Labs protection. Even if he's brain dead, you can't kill him. And he's just like, brain dead? No. He's not brain dead. He's just, like, not in his brain. So I have a feeling I know where it is. His brain must be with Superman. And then Orion just flies off. So Superman, after finishing up with the Centurions, he then goes down, gets ready to go into the party where Lois is, grabs a quick bottle of alcohol as a gift. And when he has Lois open the door, she's dressed in a Wonder Woman outfit and kisses Clark on the lips. And then all of a sudden he jolts back and he's like, oh, geez, did I just hallucinate? What the hell was that? And Lois actually opens up the door, and she's just like, oh, hey, Clark, I'm so happy you're here. Look, I don't say this enough, but I really appreciate you as a person. I love you, Smallville. And she gives him a big hug, and he's just like, what in the hell is happening right now? So at that point, Perry's talking to Clark, and he kind of just like razzes him for doing that big storm out thing he did at the beginning of Hell on Earth. And he's like, yeah, I would have been there with you, but, I got my insurance or whatever. And he's like, thanks, Perry. It means a lot for me to hear that. And he's like, yeah, would it mean more if I meant a word of it? Psh, sucker. And then we see Clark talking to Jonathan, who was, of course, like a war correspondent. And Jonathan is all getting, like, antsy about people putting glass on to his, like, tables without coasters. And so at that point, Clark's like, all right, hold the phone. Lois is being all sappy, Perry's being a dick, and Jonathan's being just weird. I think something's going on here, and I think I might also be affected by it. But then at that point, Lois steps up and just straight up says, hey, Clark, you want to make out? And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to go talk to my girlfriend now. I'm going to go talk to Diane. I'll be back. So him and Wonder Woman step out on the balcony. And he's just like, yeah, something's going on here, and I'm not sure what it is. And Wonder Woman basically is like, oh, well, I'm glad to have been here with your friend tonight. It really feels like we took this next step. Just give me a kiss or whatever. And as they go to kiss, all of a sudden, Superman is thrown halfway across the city, and he's like, okay. He lands in the river, and he just shoots up, and he's like, all right, so clearly something's going on here, and this water is allowing me to think clearly now. Somebody has a stranglehold on my friends, like psionically, maybe even the whole city. I got to figure out what's going on here. And as he jets up out of the water, he's grabbed by the cape by Orion, and he's like, hey, Superman, I don't really want to do this, but in order to save the universe, I got to kill you. And so he's about to punch Superman, end of issue. I really, 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 really dislike the meandering plot and, like, that entire Centurion thing. It's so hard for me to express to you how it didn't feel like any panel was even flowing into the next panel. Like, I glossed over that. It took maybe 30 seconds to describe it. It took 5 pages, and none of it was, like, consecutive. All of it was just these random, like, I'm pretty sure they reused panel art from, I think it was like Action Comics 2 issues ago, of him like throwing these containers. I think that was there. It was so weird of a read. And then throw in that the whole issue is actually about a housewarming party. I'm pretty sure they've been living in this apartment for like at least since the beginning of Superman. Like, I remember him knocking on their door. So yeah, I don't know. This whole issue was just a bit frustrating for me. I like the idea of Superman having to go up against like a mind control sort of villain. It's something that he can't easily punch and therefore is more interesting. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like that's what we're doing. It feels like we're dealing with other random crap, and then he's just going to go and punch Hector anyway. So overall, I'm going to give this one like a 6 flat. It's not awful. Kenneth Rocafort's art is fantastic, as it usually is, but like, I really don't like the way the plot's moving here, and I can't see any way it's going to get better. The Fury of Firestorm, number 19, written and art by Dan Jurgens. So last issue, Firestorm beat Multiplex and then saved his mom, Ronnie's mom. And this issue just picks up immediately after that. Multiplex is still out. Ronnie's like, hey, Mom, you okay? And Jason's like, dude, you're in Firestorm. Don't say Mom. And she's like, oh, sorry, ma'am. So at that point, they hear some other voices in the room, and then they're attacked by a bunch of ice daggers. And we see that it's this team of other characters, and there are 4 of them. They'll get introduced one by one, but they are Hyena, Killer Frost, Plastique, and I think it's Black Bison. And they all show up and they're like, hey, we're here to kill you, Firestorm. And turns out that it's not actually about killing him, it's about taking him in, but they all want to kill him. So anyway, Hyena jumps in first, starts slashing at Firestorm. He immediately just blasts him because, as far as we can tell, it's just a dude with a skin condition. But then Black Bison gets involved, and apparently he has the ability to control elements. And so as Ronnie's trying to fly away with his mom, he causes an air current that's so strong, Ronnie loses his grip on his mom. And the mom falls into the arms of Hyena again. And Firestorm flies out the window, bonks his head on a pier, and falls unconscious. So then we see Tanya and Jason's dad, who are following the GPS on Ronnie's mom's phone. And they basically are just reasoning out like, yeah, whoever did this knew that they were Firestorm, and they are going to, like, this is his life now. Like, no matter what, there's always going to be somebody after Firestorm, because as Jason's dad puts it, he's even more strong than Superman. So Ronnie wakes up. He starts to get out of the water, but then he's dragged into a whirlpool created by our 6th member, if you count Multiplex, named Typhoon. And he's like, yeah, I can control water, which Black Bison's able to control the elements, which I assume include water. So why did we need Typhoon? But regardless, he's here, and he's put Firestorm through a whirlpool that turns into an entire fist. Whatever. Point being is he's now out of the water. And he's about to start fighting the team, but Hyena's like, I got this lady, whoever it is, because we don't know the relation here, because apparently Multiplex is keeping that close to the chest. But regardless, he's like, oh, I have to play this strategically rather than all up at once. And so he says, you're right, you have the upper hand, I'll leave forever. And he phases through the pier, pops up on the other side, and then just makes a hole where Hyena was. Feel like you could have done that at any point, but regardless, at that point, Killer Frost jumps in, and she encases both Ronnie and his mom in ice, but it turns out that she has some amount of a biological component in it, so that Ronnie can't just melt it away super easily. So she's also laying on the moves on Ronnie this entire time, just like, oh yeah, how about you, hot stuff? And the mom starts yelling like, oh, get away from her, you sick, and she's about to call her a bitch. But then Killer Frost turns around and like impales her with a couple of ice daggers. Cut to General Eiling, who is just sitting there watching all of this happen on his screens, and he's like, hey, random shadowy figure that we're paying a small fortune, you're up. Go take care of them and Firestorm. It doesn't end up in this issue, so I'm sure next issue we'll see it. At that point, Killer Frost encases Ronnie's mom even more, to the point where she's unable to breathe. Ronnie starts freaking out about it. Multiplex wakes up and he says, hey, we had a deal. I need her alive so that I can blackmail Firestorm into giving me what I need. I need more energy. That's all I've ever wanted. And like, the whole thing is that he just absorbed a bunch of energy at the end of last issue, so I don't know why he wants even more of it now. But regardless, he says, okay, Ronnie, and this is Jason, he's like, Ronnie, you can't use your hands, you gotta use your eyes to send the power over to Multiplex. It's the only way to save your mom. And then he uses his hands and just breaks out of the ice and gives the power to Multiplex anyway. Sure. So at that point, Multiplex has a lot of power. Ronnie manages to break out his mom. Typhoon does a thing with a tidal wave. And then Multiplex breaks into 4 guys who are each much stronger than your average person and starts beating the crap out of Ronnie. And finally, he's like, okay, Jason, you got any ideas here? And Jason says, yeah, use your powers to shrink their masks so they can't breathe. Genius. And so he does it. Multiplex is down again, but there's still 5 others. Somehow the mom has fallen into the hands of Hyena again. And at this point, Plastique finally steps up and she's like, hey, my power is I explode. And we see Tanya and Mr. Rush make their way toward the warehouse where it is. All of a sudden, huge explosion goes off. They freak out, but they see a fiery body coming over, landing on his car. And they're like, oh my God, is that them? Are they okay? And lo and behold, it is Firestorm. But Tanya thinks that he's dead because he doesn't look so good. Okay. I just really want to lay down that next issue is the last issue. I really want you to understand that before I give my review, is that next issue is the final issue of this series. They know it's the final issue. They are working towards that. We just got introduced to 5 separate characters, each of which needed time to develop, and let's not forget the shadowy figure that General Eiling is employing next issue. That means next issue we're going to have to be introduced to yet another new character in the final issue. That's, I think, the biggest problem I have with this particular set of issues. It felt like Dan Jurgens really had this story in mind. Like, he really wanted to tell this story of, oh, this group of 6 villains coming after Firestorm, and they're all like people from his past, like continuity-wise. But he didn't have the time. He didn't have the ability to, but he insisted. And it just feels so insanely rushed and so lacking any sort of consequences that I can't get behind it, you know? It doesn't feel like a good story. It just feels like, hey, let's throw this at the wall and see what sticks before we hit the end. I can't even begin to tell you where it's going, but that doesn't feel like it's a mystery. It just feels like, okay, you're just going for wacky and zany. That's all it is. You really wanted these 6 different people here, and we're just going to roll with them. Either way, I got to give this one like, I'm going to say like a 5.5. I'm just going to go flat 5, honestly. It's not awful in any way. It doesn't make me like dislike things that I've previously liked. It's just an average comic. It is like, if you think, hey, here is a superhero just beating up a bunch of people and getting beat up for an entire issue with no stakes whatsoever, this is it. It's not awful dialogue. It's not awful art. It's perfectly mediocre in every way. And it's not a good way to even get close to ending your series. So I really hope that he pulls something out of his sleeve for next and final issue. The Flash number 19, written by Brian Buccellato, art by Marcio Takara, with Francis Manapul hopping in at the epilogue. So, last issue, Barry was in Iron Heights trying to prove the Trickster was innocent of a crime, and then all of a sudden he lost his powers just as people were coming in to break out the Trickster. So this issue picks up just in a suburb where Floyd Gomez and Marissa Rennie live, and they are the people who were trapped in the Speed Force, and Floyd got powers. And Albert, the other guy who got powers, shows up and he's like, hey, where's Gomez? The Iron Heights is being attacked. We got to go try to do our hero thing. And Marissa's like, yeah, no, he's not here. Like, I don't know where he is. And they're watching it on the TV, and Albert basically says, like, well, he might already be there. We got to go and find out. And I guess he more says, I have to go find out. And Marissa's like, no, I'm coming with. It's like, we all were there. I'm coming with now. And Albert's like, boy, I sure hope the Flash is there. And then we see Barry Allen, who, because he was in the armory when he lost his powers, he's basically done a John McClane and has loaded up with all of these weapons that belong to all of his rogues. And he's like, all right, so I have to go and stop these guys from getting anybody hurt. And I have to make sure they don't get their hands on these weapons. So the guys are already coming down the elevator, they're coming down into the armory. Meanwhile, a different crew has broken into Trickster's room and has started breaking him out. And they're like, hey, cool, Trickster, you're here. Let's go. Like, Flash and or cops are going to be in here any minute. And he's like, no, I'll go. And I'm super grateful you're breaking me out, but I need my hand back. I need that. And I definitely want my toys. So at that point, we see Flash has taken all the stuff out of the armory, and he's trying to use Weather Wizard's wand to do something, anything. All he can conjure up is fog. So as everybody's walking up and down the halls, he's like, okay, now I guess I can make some use of this. So he makes a visual distraction, and then he presses a different button, which causes the Weather Wizard's huge gust of wind to blow all them out of the room and knock him out. And he's like, oh, sweet, awesome. But then he overhears on one of the radios that another team is coming down, so he's like, ah, crap. So then we see Marissa and Albert have hijacked a speedboat, and Albert's used his powers as turbocharger to modify it into this super high-powered rocket boat, and it just crashes into the rocky beach of Iron Heights. And they're like, cool, we survived. Anyway, let's go inside. So Albert says he'll go inside. Marissa's just going to chill out here. We see inside, one of them's going up and down the elevator. Barry throws a stun bomb in there that takes some of them out. And he hears them over the radio calling like, oh, what's happening? What's going on down there? We see the guy who's leading out Trickster is like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but we're losing like team members here. So clearly Flash is probably already here. We got to go now, regardless of your hand. And he's like, no. Like, we're in a prison. We can just open up the cells and throw the inmates at them. That'll slow them down. And Turbocharger, Albert, hears this, and he's like, oh, I can help. I'm going to go over to this relay box, and I'm going to disable it using my powers. And he zaps it, and then all of a sudden, all of the inmates' doors fly open. So now Barry's crawling through the air ducts, and he hears Albert yelling for help, and he's like, geez, okay. Albert manages to get away, but Barry jumps down and uses one of Captain Boomerang's electrified boomerangs to shock everybody and take them all out. And he's like, all right, Albert, where are you? I got to deal with this. So he runs into the next room. He sees Albert has already been caught by Trickster and his gang. And Trickster's like, hey, wait, I know you somewhere. You're the bartender. What in the hell are you doing here? And Albert's like, Barry, what in the hell are you doing here? You don't have powers. And he basically comes up and he's like, all right, Albert, is Gomez here? And he's like, nah, I didn't see him. I don't think so. And they basically are saying like, okay, but like, seriously, why are you here? Like, what possible reason would you have to be here? And Albert accidentally turbocharges one of the guy's guns. So now it's like a huge laser pistol. And Barry has to come clean. He's like, look, I was a cop. I was trying to clear your name, Trickster. That's like why I was here. And I just got stuck up in all this. And Albert's like, it's kind of a moot point, what with the whole breaking him out of prison thing. Like, he's definitely guilty of that. So I don't know why you were trying to prove his innocence for the other thing. And Barry's like, okay, whatever. Anyway, so at that point, the whole room starts shaking. There's like some sort of vibration thing going on, and Barry recognizes it. And he tells everybody to duck, and all of a sudden there's a huge explosion. And he runs over to Albert, asks him if he's okay. Everything starts vibrating again, and he's like, wait a minute, hold on. I have an idea. And he pulls out Captain Cold's gun, and he tells Albert to turbocharge it, make it like something souped up. And so he does. It becomes this hyper-sized ice cannon, and he uses that to blast all of the criminals in the room and just freeze them solid. And as he looks around, he sees Marissa in there as well. And it turns out Marissa is the one who originally robbed from the bank to begin with. She got Speed Force powers of like a vibration, didn't know how to handle them, accidentally killed the guard, and she was doing this of like trying to kill everyone in the prison so that her secret didn't get out and the investigation would just end with the death of Trickster. And at that point, Flash gets his powers back because whatever was going on in Dial H ended. So Albert comes up to Flash afterwards and is like, oh, hey, Flash, I don't think I'm suited to be a hero anymore. I'm done with all that. But you need to talk to my friend Barry because he was so cool under pressure. He's definitely like the hero type. And Flash is like, I'll do that. So it seemed like, and then he's just reasoning through, everybody got Speed Force powers except for Iris. That's kind of weird. So then we cut up to the Watchtower. Flash is using all their supercomputers to try to figure out what happened to his powers. Cyborg walks in, asks him what he's doing. He's like, okay, I narrowed it down. Turns out Batman already knew about the dial from Dial H, and he's been keeping tabs on it. And right as my powers dipped out, someone showed up in the Dial H area with my powers. So that's all figured out, and it won't ever happen again. This is just a one and done crossover. So then he shuts off the computer, and he talks to Cyborg, and he's like, I didn't have my powers today, and I still managed to be a hero. Maybe it's what's on the inside that counts and not the superpowers. And Cyborg's like, are you trying to like bond with me? Are you telling me like it has nothing to do with my robotic parts? Is that what you're aiming for here? And Flash is like, I guess, yeah, sure. So that's that. And then we get the epilogue where Albert is dead on the hood of a car, and a voiceover's like, the first time you kill someone, you react differently. But I'm not a good guy, and it isn't easy for me, but I can do a little wrong in order to make stuff right. And the best part is I can always give it a second try by reversing things. And we see Albert fly up into the sky, and it's a reverse Flash that is dangling him off the building and then just dropping him over and over again. Okay, so we have a reverse Flash, which we already got the hint of, I think, in issue like 17, so not that big of a deal. But he killed Albert. He's able to maybe reverse time, I guess is his power here. I don't know. There's a lot going on. It's not really worth the time to say it, though, because it is just an epilogue, but I think that the main story was good. I think it does a good job of last issue set up these new heroes, and then this issue's just like, nope, we're wiping them off the table. They are not a factor, while still leaving this little mystery about Iris as to whether or not she has any powers. So all that stuff combined, it's good setting up for the future while still telling an interesting kind of die-hard story within its own right. And I really like how all the villains interacted with Barry as well, because they're like, oh, who are you? Like, what are you doing here? I like that no one just accepted the fact that this guy just showed up and was just doing things. They were like, no, seriously, what are you doing here? So art-wise, writing-wise, I enjoyed it. I'll give the whole issue I'll give it a 7.5. It doesn't quite have that extra panache to get it to an 8, but I enjoyed it. So, yeah. The Savage Hawkman, number 19, written by Tom DeFalco, art by Joe Bennett and Jack Jadson. So, last issue was a whole bunch of whatever. Doesn't really impact this story, save for the fact of there were weird experiments going on at this mental health facility, and they were thinking about putting Emma's dad in there. And this issue basically deals with that. So we pick up in media res with somebody throwing around Hawkman, And it's this big hulking brute, and he's like, oh, you're a threat, you're a danger to her. And Hawkman's like, don't make me hurt you, I'll hurt you. And he pulls out his nth metal ace, and the giant hand just crushes it in his hand. And then we cut back to 24 hours earlier, where Hawkman is flying around, and he's like, I'm in Justice League of America now. I wasn't when this book started, but now I am, and we're just going to pretend like it's always been a thing. And he questions why in Justice League of America they made him out to be a Thanagarian police officer in need of diplomatic immunity, which I also questioned because that was not at all the origin story. But hey, that's just, I guess they are lying in that book. So anyway, he transforms out of Hawkman. He calls up Emma and says like, hey, Emma, what's going on? And Emma's like, hey, just wanted to remind you, we're going to drop my dad off at that place tomorrow. Are you coming with? And he's like, yeah, sure, of course, I'm totally going to be there. Unless the JLA needs me. They don't. So we go to the Rest Haven Medical Facility, and we meet Mark, who we met last time. He was the patient that was being like tested on or something like that. But he comes out and he greets them, and Dr. Ziegler is like, oh yeah, hey, Emma, I want to go talk to the guy in charge myself. You explore the grounds with them. Please just give me that last little dignity before I'm locked away in this home. And I was like, okay, well, you're making me feel bad, but yeah, sure, whatever. So her, Carter, and Mark explore the grounds as Dr. Ziegler goes and meets with Dr. Fane. And he's basically like, all right, Dr. Fane, here's the thing. I've done some research into you. You've done amazing things here with like dementia and Alzheimer's, but it seems like you don't really follow the normal treatment schedule. And Fane's like, yeah, nah, I think that's stupid. We come here and we face it. We take the aggressive approach. And Ziegler's like, I'm intrigued. Can you tell me more? So then we cut over to Mark, who's basically showing him around. And he's just like, oh, yeah, no, his place is great. I love Dr. Fane. He does great stuff. We used to have more people working here, but Doc blamed it on something called the economy. And when they all left, we do our special work. And both of Emma and Carter are like, what do you mean by special work there, pal? And he's like, oh, it's a secret. I can't tell you. But sometimes it really, really hurts. And they're like, okay. So are you like good? And he's like, oh yeah, no. I mean, kids used to pick on me all the time, but now my dad gave me this medallion. He passed away. And they're like, Mark, you're saying a lot of tragic stuff, and it sounds like bad things are going on. You cool? And Mark's just like, oh, yeah, no, it was no big deal. So he also has taken a liking to Emma, saying that she's a pretty lady and very nice to him. And at that point, Dr. Fane and Ziegler show up and just be like, yeah, no, everything's cool. We're totally cool. I like this place. So Emma, if you could come in and just sign the paperwork and we'll all be good. And Carter's like, Professor, are you sure? Like, we're talking to Mark here and he's kind of not okay. And he's just like, no offense, but this is a family decision. So, Emma, you in? And Emma's like, okay, yeah, no, I guess I'll pick up the paperwork then. So, then we cut to later, I guess at Emma's apartment. And Carter's trying to cook dinner for Emma, failing miserably, and says, cool, what do you want on your pizza? But they now have to have the talk, as at the end of last issue, Emma was basically like, look, you might have to choose between Hawkman and me. What's it going to be? And he's just like, yeah, well, now I'm involved in the JLI, so that made everything a little bit more complicated. But yeah, they sit down and start having their talk. Cut over to Rest Haven. Dr. Ziegler's gotten a little confused. He doesn't know where he is. He's wandering the halls. He hears screaming. He follows that. And as he hears the screaming, he calls up Emma. And Carter and Emma are, sharing a pizza, just talking, trying to figure out what's going on. And then Emma picks up, and he's like, oh no, something's going on. He's experimenting on this boy. And he comes in and sees Mark being experimented on. And Ziegler's like, you've overstepped. You're torturing this boy. He's like, no, this is his treatment. I'm doing what's best for him. But Ziegler stumbles in, trips over some cords, and has doused both himself and Mark in this experimental liquid. So Carter hears the yelling and screaming on his end of the phone. He Hawkman's out and says like, I fly faster alone. And I was like, dude, that's my dad. You're taking me with. Fair enough. So they fly over to Rest Haven, and immediately busting out the side of doors, that same hulking brute from the beginning. It turns out it's Ziegler. Ziegler is hulked out, and he's like, oh, You beast with my daughter. He's not good for you, Emma. Get away from my daughter. So Ziegler starts beating the ever-loving crap out of Hawkman. Hawkman's trying not to fight back because it's his girlfriend's dad. But, kind of has to fight back a little bit. Dr. Fane runs out of the building, and Emma's like, what did you do to my dad? And he's like, what do you do? Your dad's the whole reason this happened, and he only got a minor dose. You got to worry about Mark, who was doused in majority of it. And then all of a sudden, pretty much destroying the whole of the building, busts out Mark. And he charges after Hawkman, grabs him and says like, oh, you're just making fun of me like all those kids did before. And he starts beating the crap out of him. Emma tells her dad that she has to save Hawkman, and in his anger and unknown strength, he somehow accidentally backhands his daughter and is like, no, I didn't mean it. So at that point, she's unconscious. Ziegler's now fighting against Mark because Mark has turned his attention to Emma being knocked out, and he's like, she was pretty and she was nice to me and you hurt her. Now we will fight. And so they're charging after each other. Meanwhile, Hawkman's just been knocked down a well far off the property, and his nth metal recedes, and it looks like he's going to die in this well. I'm sure he will with one issue left in the series. He'll definitely die here. Okay. I enjoy it. I think it's a solid enough, it's building up Blockbuster, because that's just the name of the whole thing is Blockbuster. Beware the Blockbuster, in fact. So we're setting up Mark as this bigger villain. We do have one little panel. I don't even know where it is, but we have one panel that basically sets up the name. So I like that as a villain setup of, here's this guy, we met him as just a normal person before and then doused in chemicals. And it's not just him. That's the part I like about it, is that someone else was affected by it as well. And I'm sure they're going to get Dr. Ziegler either dead or back to normal by the end of next issue. He's not just going to be a villain that reoccurs, but it's nice to see that there is this thing where one of them is going to continue to be a villain and the other one's going to be probably fine. I say probably. So overall, I enjoyed it. I think the art's fine. I look forward to seeing how they're going to wrap everything up next issue. Because this book is ending and JLA is continuing, I assume that they'll finish up their talk with Emma saying, you have to be Hawkman. This is who you really are, or something like that. And we'll end it on a little tragic note. But honestly, with that in mind, Ziegler might actually die. So we'll see how that goes. Either way, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a flat 7. It's fine. It's good throughout. It goes by really fast, and it's not a bad thing, but it is just kind of like a basic, decent comic. There's nothing that much more I can really say about it. So, 7. Katana number 3, written by Ann Nocenti, art by Cliff Richards. So last issue, a whole lot of things with Sword Clan and Dagger Clan. It was Killer Croc is showing up. That's where we left off. And we pick up as well with Croc flying into San Francisco. He's being told that they're landing in 15 minutes. And he asks his driver to take him to a ship graveyard that is apparently in a marina nearby. And all of his internal monologue is saying, I'm out looking for dragons. Apparently the last dragon was slain with Katana's sword. I know she's in this area, and now I just gotta sit here and wait for my plan to come together. So, cut to the bar where Tatsu is currently working. She overhears a bunch of people talking from the Dagger Clan, and she's like, yep, I'm mastering the art of being just completely invisible by being the most boring human being alive. And that way people will let their lips be loose and share secrets. And she hears that the Dagger Clan is going to be meeting at the boat graveyard. So she's like, well, that's all I need to know. I'll meet them up there. But then she's talked to by her boss saying that some bowling alley gangsters are causing trouble in the other room, including a guy named Two Pins. And so she thinks it's ironic justice that she's going to use a bowling ball, throw it, and hit 2 pins in the shins. And that'll somehow stop him from being an ass. And it works. So then we cut to I don't even, it's just like a store in Japantown where she picks up a sword a lot like, I forget his name, the whip guy. It says it later on. Coil, that's it. Like Coil's sword. And I guess she wants to try to practice with it. But as she's walking back home, she goes by Junko, that town drunk guy who gave her some good information. And Junko steals the coil sword and just starts like whipping it around as a master. And he's like, oh, see what I'm able to do? I can do all this. I can steal your hat right off your head with it. And he tells her to give it a try. She just ends up whipping herself with it accidentally. And he's like, you're no good at that. You should stick with what you know, because you're going to have to practice this over and over and over again in order to get as good as me. And she gets pissed off at that and starts attacking him. And he fights off the attack, but then she manages to grab his alcohol and like runs up a building with it. And he's just like, all right, fair enough. Yeah, no, you caught me. Give me back my booze. And I don't know if it's going to come into play later, but he says, where do you hide your sword, Tatsu? So at this point, we see her in a katana outfit. She's practicing with the coil sword. She's getting slightly better at it, but she's still not a master of it. And we see the 3 people she's encountered so far, which are Coil and Sickle, 2 of the like higher ups in the Sword Clan, and Thrust, who is her turncoat that she's got going on. And she talks to her sword, which of course has her husband's soul in it. And she's like, oh, my husband, is it okay that I'm working with the enemy? And then nothing is said. And she's like, oh, how could you say that to me? I've always loved you. So I guess the sword didn't like it. Anyway, she goes to the Wayward Marina. She hears the Dagger Clan talking inside. And she's like, okay, these guys are kind of stupid and they're not as good as the Sword Clan. So I'm going to purposely trigger their trap, their little bell that they've got set up. So that way they think I'm incompetent. They let their guard down and I can just take them all out at once. And she does pretty much that, though there is a second wave that she didn't quite expect, who are slightly better and they're able to use a bit more attack on her. And they actually do manage to get the upper hand after a little bit. And as the leader of the Dagger Clan comes up, he's like, sorry, Katana, but we just sold your sword to the highest bidder. And he's about to come up and kill her. And then all of a sudden, Croc pops out, grabs the guy who's going to kill her, throws him off the ship, throws off all the other guys, and just like, hey, you did your job. You got paid for getting her here. Now back off. Because he wants the sword, and I guess he doesn't want Katana to be dead for it, but they never establish why. So anyway, Katana's like, okay, I don't really want to deal with Killer Croc. So she sees a propane tank. She chops off the tube that was keeping it all together. Then she uses some fire to basically set fire to Croc. And Croc's like, ouch, that's mildly inconvenient. But, you know, I have these scales that are protecting me. And as she tries to jump overboard on the ship, Croc manages to grab her sword in his teeth. And before she's able to get it back, Croc just snaps it in half. And it shatters in his mouth. And she freaks out because there's a bunch of souls now flying around, including the soul of her husband, but also including a demonic Oni soul who's like, hey, you thought your husband was the one talking to you? Nah, it was me. I was the one who was telling you to do all of those stupidly dumb things. That's right, me, the soul of the Creeper. And that's where the issue ends, is the Creeper is alive, or his soul is out at the very least. Here's the thing, I know very little about the Creeper. Modern Comics has recently introduced him again in Tom King miniseries, but it ain't this. It ain't an ancient Japanese demon soul. So I'm curious to see what path they could possibly take with this Creeper. I'd imagine that it's just basically going to be an original character that happens to use the name and kind of the style of the Creeper, but who knows? Maybe this will be Katana's Joker. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what they're going for. I'm not all that impressed yet, and I'm also really confused as to how Croc was just able to do that. Here's the thing. All I'm really getting to at the end of all this is that Katana has been made to look so weak over the course of this series. Like, in every other thing she's made an appearance in, she's been the muscle. She's the one who comes in with precision and skill and just takes care of business. But for some reason in this series, she's just an idiot. She just can't do anything right. And it bothers me, the difference in quality there. So, yeah, no, I don't really care for most of what this issue does. It's just kind of, for me, padding, but I don't even know what we're padding to at this point. It feels like we've never really laid down what the core plot has been since issue 1. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 5.5. It's not awful. I do like the art style in some places, but for the most part, the writing still has just not grabbed me, and it's only getting a bit weirder with every... We literally got to a demon soul of the Creeper. Yeah, we lost the plot. 5.5. All-Star Western number 19, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Moritat, start of a new arc. And this issue immediately picks up with Booster Gold finding Jonah Hex on the side of a river. Because, yeah, we're going for crazy. So, Booster say, hey, I'm the sheriff in these parts, and I want to know what you're doing with these 3 dead bodies in this river. And Jonah immediately calls him out because he's wearing his Booster Gold outfit. And it's like, you don't seem like a sheriff. He's like, yeah, I got the star and everything. No. You don't seem like a sheriff because you're pointing a gun at me. And I've been on the wrong end of a gun long enough to know you're not the kind that's ever going to shoot. And a sheriff needs to be able to shoot. And he's like, okay, well, maybe I haven't shot someone, but that doesn't mean I'm not the sheriff. And he still says, either way, you're around these dead bodies. Who are you even? And he's like, yeah, my name's Jonah Hex. And he's like, that name sounds really familiar. How do I know you? He's like, don't know, don't care. What's your name? And he says Booster Gold. And he basically asks him why a bounty hunter is here with 3 dead bodies that he apparently didn't kill himself. And Jonah's like, I got a better question for you. Where are you from wearing such a ridiculous getup? And he's like, I'm from Gotham. And he's like, no, you're not. I just came from Gotham. You don't sound anything like Gotham. And he's like, okay, look, I'm asking questions here. Where did these dead bodies come from? And he tells them, well, their guns are still holstered, so it was an ambush, and they still have their goods on them, which means they were killed just for the sake of being killed, which means that this is from a gang called the Clem Hootkins Gang, which are just the worst. Then we go over to the Clem Hootkins Gang, who have come into town, and as they come riding in, he's just like, hello, my name is Clement Hootkins, and I would like to know if there was any law enforcement representatives in this town. And this local drunk comes up and he's like, hey, you at the circus? You guys got a dwarf with you. And the dwarf's name is Cyclops, and he's very easily angered, but Clem holds him back and just like, oh, hello, sir. Could you please tell me if there's a sheriff in town? He's like, yeah, we got a sheriff. He ain't here right now, though. Okay, well, what about a deputy? No, we don't got no deputies. It's a small town. It's like, okay, well, do you have a bank? He's like, yeah, it's right over there. Why, you gonna rob it? And Clem just shoots this guy in the head and says, yes. And then the dwarf Cyclops just rips off this tarp from their cart, has a Gatling gun underneath, and starts unloading on this entire town. The gang makes their way slowly over to the bank, kills the teller inside, and steals all of the money. And Clem's like, well, another job well done. We've got ourselves some money. Let's destroy this town and move on. And he throws back a stick of dynamite. It's Red River Junction is the name of the town. And they all just drive away. And then soon afterwards, Booster and Jonah arrive. And they're like, what? At least Booster's like, what in the world just happened here? Like, I left and everything was fine, and now everything's on fire and people are dead. And Jonah's like, yeah, this isn't even like top 5 of the worst things I've seen. And someone calls him out, and they're like, wait a minute, you're Jonah Hex. You're the one who shot Stonewall Jackson. And Booster's like, wait a minute, that's right, Jonah Hex. I remember you now. And he just goes through Jonah's entire origin story. And Jonah pulls out his gun and he's like, okay, how do you know that much about me? Because some of that stuff is like pretty private stuff. And he's like, okay, I can tell you, but first maybe we should deal with the whole chasing after the gang thing. And he's like, look, I know who did this. I know the direction they would have been going. I'll chase them down in the morning. And Booster says, like, no, I'm coming with you. I'm the sheriff. I need to see these men brought to justice. I need to put them in jail. And Jonah pulls out his wanted poster for Clem Hootkins that just says wanted, dead on it. And he's like, no. This guy's going in a box, and I'm going to be the one that puts him there. Anyway, we can't do anything until morning. We're going over to the bar, and you're going to have some drinks with me and tell me exactly where you're from. So they get some drinks, and Booster's like, okay, I'm from the future. And Jonah just like, oh, haha, very funny. And he's like, no, seriously, I'm from the future. Let me tell you how it happened. So then we get a bit where the sheriff is just chilling in the local jail. He's got one prisoner there. And the prisoner's like, oh, it sounds like my brother Emmett coming here to break me out. And the sheriff's like, ah, geez, this guy's more trouble than he's worth. And we see this guy, Emmett, and two of his friends wearing masks. They busted into the sheriff's place, and they just start basically beating him up, trying to free Emmett's brother, Pete. And the sheriff, he's like, Emmett, damn it, I recognize it's you. I know it's you. Your brother just got arrested for being drunk and, like, harassing women at the bar. I was going to let him go in the morning as soon as he slept it off, but you just had to come in here and assault a law enforcement officer. Do you understand how much trouble you're in now, Emmett? And he's like, well, I guess I'm an outlaw then, so you better listen to me and what I demand of you. He's like, Emmett, I'm so tired of this. Look, I will let your brother go in the morning if you just leave now and we'll call it even. I swear I won't even come after you. And he's like, nope, because when I swore I was going to break my brother out, you called me out on it in front of the town, and I will not stand that embarrassment. And he's just like, okay, you two, friends of Emmett, get out of here. Like, he's an idiot, but you guys just go. And I also recognize both of you as well, so just don't get involved in this. And so they start leaving. Emmett gets pissed off. He starts beating the ever-loving crap out of the sheriff to the point where he ain't going to live through that. And then all of a sudden, Booster Gold just like teleports in. He just shows up and he looks down. He sees the sheriff dead on the ground. He's like, oh my God, what did you do to this man? And he's like, oh, well, I killed him and you better learn your place too. And he goes down, he listens to the sheriff and he's like, what happened? And he's like, oh, this man beat me up. You have to see that justice is done. And so he turns to Emmett, punches him in the face and says, I'm the sheriff now. So Emmett's arrested. Booster goes outside, talks to the town folks. He's like, guys, your sheriff's dead. I'm taking over as temporary sheriff until a new one can be appointed to you. And then we cut back to Jonah and Booster, who have spent all night drinking. They didn't sleep at all. Jonah's totally fine. Booster is on the floor. And Jonah's like, well, that's a crazy story and I don't believe it. But anyway, we got to get going. And Booster's like, well, we haven't slept and we're drunk. And he's like, no, you're drunk. I'm fine. We're going to go. And so Booster stumbles out the door after Jonah. And he's like, okay, yep, it's really bright out here. And I'm definitely going to puke. And he pukes on the ground next to Jonah. And he's like, all right, future boy, daylight's burning. Let's go. And that's the issue. So I like it. I really like how it's setting things up. We've got a interesting new villain because, like, he does speak in that posh thing, but then he's just so merciless with it. It's pretty unnerving, honestly. His gang also seems pretty cool just from the few lines they had. Booster being here, tons of new opportunities for stories. I'm interested to see how they're going to go down. They can very easily mess it up, though. I'm hoping that they get it in the right way, but there's a lot of ways that they can mess up a time travel story, so we'll see how that works out. But overall, this particular issue, I give it like a 7.5. It's good. The art's solid. I like the writing of it, but it doesn't quite just hit that extra little bump to get me to, no, this is like a fantastic issue. It's still just a good one, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. Teen Titans number 19, written by Scott Lobdell and Tony Bedard, art by Eddy Barrows. So last issue, Red Robin pulled the Teen Titans to fight the Suicide Squad and then made a deal with Amanda Waller, and they didn't like that, and then Trigon showed up. So at this point, we see Wonder Girl grabbing Red Robin by the throat, basically demanding answers as to why they were forced to fight the Suicide Squad for seemingly no reason. And Kid Flash and all the rest of the Teen Titans are trying to like talk her down, just like pull her off and saying like, okay, yeah, you know, maybe there's a reason that he did it. We need to just let him talk and explain himself. And that's what teammates do. He's never led us astray before. And so Cassie sets down Tim and it's just like, okay, tell us your side of the story and tell us the truth. And Red Robin's like, I don't know you anything. You're on my team. I opened up my house and you expect an explanation. No, either you're with me or you're out. I don't need this sort of insubordination anymore. And I really don't care either way. And as he's walking away, everyone is like, okay, well, that's unexpected, but you know, maybe he's been through a lot. You know, there was a whole thing going on in his backstory we're not aware of. So at that point, then Cassie just crashes to the ground. Her what's it called? Silent armor? I think that's it. It all of a sudden triggers, and she immediately knows that Trigon is around, and she is off to take care of it. And Superboy, having been on that arc, explains it all to everyone else. So cut over to Trigon in Times Square. He's just causing mass mayhem and destruction. We see that this kid who has the ability to kill people just by thinking like drop dead, he apparently now goes by the name of Szymon, P-S-I-M-O-N, and he's cowering in fear from Trigon. But then Trigon notices him, and he's like, hey, you got some powers, and they're really, really dark, like super edgelord stuff. You and I, we got powers together. And he's like, oh, seriously? Power? That's sweet. And then all of a sudden, Cassie comes in and is like, you want to talk about power? And just punches Trigon in the face to the point where he actually like feels it. And she's like, okay, yeah, you sucker punch me, good enough. And then grabs Cassie out of midair and be like, but you ain't going to do that again. And then we see that he's able to look into Cassie's like mind and her past and says like, oh, you would have been so much different if your father had raised you and showed you your true lineage. And we see that her father is, I'm blanking on his name. I think it's like Calyx or something like that from Wonder Woman. Like one of the secondary characters from that book who we are very well acquainted with. And she's like, what? I didn't even know my father. How do you know that? So at that point, Superboy comes in, starts throwing punches, and Trigon's about to do like a crazy I-beam attack, and Kid Flash manages to swoop him out of the way. All the Titans are together here, and Red Robin's like, okay, what are we up against? What in the heck is it, Wonder Girl? And she's like, oh, it's Trigon, like Elder God thing. We might need the Justice League. This is a bit much for us. Cut to LA, where Beast Boy is reeling from the end of Ravagers. Like, Ravagers ended with issue 20. I don't know how it ends, but apparently Beast Boy is not okay. And Raven shows up and says, hey, Beast Boy, I'm Raven. You're just barely alive. And for some reason, I need you. And she senses that Trigon has already started attacking the Earth. And he's like, okay, Beast Boy, here's the thing. I need to bring you into this battle. I really wish you could have waited, but right now we are birds of a feather and I control you. So cut back to New York. Trigon's using his powers to entrap Bunker in his own bricks, which Wonder Girl's trying to punch him out of. And Red Robin's just standing there like, huh, he's kind of just toying with us and he could kill us with just a thought. So I don't know why he's doing this. And Kid Flash is like, okay, well, you think that one through. I'm going to go ahead and save our friends. And as he rushes in Trigon, he does the same like mind whammy attack thing and says like, oh, Kid Flash, you were sentenced to death for like something in your past and you're not aware of it. And he's like, oh my God, you're right, I was. It's like crimes against humanity? What is going on? So Superboy and Wonder Girl jump in to throw some more punches, but they are immediately grabbed by Beast Boy, being controlled by Raven and given the form of an octopus, but only in his lower half, so they can grab all of the Teen Titans and the tentacles. And basically they're just like, okay, I don't even know this one. I have no idea what she's about, but Red Robin's thinking like, all right, Trigon, what's your real game? What are you really after? And Solstice sees that Szymon is in one of the tentacles, and he's like, hey, don't be afraid. Like, we'll save you. We'll make sure you're fine. And he's like, I'm not afraid. I ain't afraid of nothing. You should all be afraid. I'm on power. And then all of a sudden the military shows up, starts shooting at Beast Boy's tentacles, ends up causing Solstice and the crew to like fall to the ground. And then Simon's like, I'm so sick of being pushed around. All you military folks can just drop dead. And of course they all drop dead. And then Beast Boy's like, you just killed all them with your mind? And he's like, yeah, and I'm going to do it to you next. Not if I grind your bones into dust first. And then both of them collapse. All the other Teen Titans are fine. And they're like, oh, their powers must have canceled each other out. Which I don't understand how Beast Boy's ability to turn into an octopus cancels out dropping dead. But sure, why not? So at that point, we see Tim Drake's like, okay, here's the thing. A bunch of U.S. soldiers are dead. We're the only ones left here. Trigon's just gone, I guess. He just disappeared off panel. And all people are going to remember is a bunch of teenagers failing to save the day. Raven, is this what your father wanted to do to us? To bring us down and make us look bad? And Raven's like, I don't know. Yeah, that sounds like something he'd do. Yeah, sure. That's what he did. He did that to you. And then the issue just ends. Okay, so I'm just going to ignore the fact that they just spoil the end of Ravagers, because whatever. It's not going to matter after the fact, so who cares? I hate the fact that Scott Lobdell loves his mysteries so much. How he sets up these things and he's like, oh, but then who is this mysterious character? You're not going to get an answer for that for 4 issues. Like, why did Red Robin have them talk to the Suicide Squad? And ends last issue saying, and we'll talk about it later. And then when this issue comes around, he's just like, I don't want to talk about it. And I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we even bothering telling a story if we're not going to get half of it? I don't feel like I'm ever getting answers to the things that Lobdell is like setting up here. And he throws so much at the wall and nothing ever sticks. It's just random crap. Why is Raven now just controlling Beast Boy? Oh, well, I'm sure we'll get the answer to that maybe in 3 issues time. But more likely, we're just going to be forced to accept that it happened. Remember when Skitter just disappeared? What was the answer to that, Lobdell? The answer is nowhere. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm so frustrated with this book because this is the first point where I felt like maybe there could have been something going on, because it had like a series of issues here that I thought were actually pretty just cohesive, all within themselves. But then this season one's just throwing everything at the wall again. Remember that dude who was made of light? He wasn't even in this issue. He was barely in the last issue, but he's a character that we're going to have to get familiar with at some point eventually. I'm giving this one a 4. And the only reason I'm giving it that high is because I think the art is fine. I didn't have any problems following the series of events from panel to panel, but the writing did not do that any favors. So 4. I, Vampire number 19, written by Joshua Hale Fialkov, art by Fernando Blanco and Andrea Sorrentino, coming back for the framing device. So I'm going to talk about the Blanco story first because it's kind of the main story, and this is bookended by the Sorrentino art, so we'll just get to that. But anyway, final issue. So last issue we had Mary coming back to life, Lilith coming back to life, a whole bunch of vampires coming back to life. And right now we see that the bookkeeper guy has basically fallen for Mary for Lilith. Mary's back and is just like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to explain everything for anyone who's not around. Lilith is now back. Andrew is good again. The keeper guy is enraptured with Lilith. And Debbie looks like an old hag. And Debbie's like, hey, what? I didn't even do anything. And they're saying, all right, Cain he needed the House of Mystery to reincarnate his bride, but the House of Mystery is actually a prison made for him, so that's a thing. And Kane literally points out, like, what are you, the Deus Ex Machina? And she's like, yeah, kinda. That's pretty much what I'm doing. Anyway, I'm going to take care of Lilith. And so she just starts attacking Lilith, who, mind you, is inhabiting Tig's body right now. So we see Kane try to fire back at Mary. Mary is so powerful or something at this point. She's like able to just deflect it. And she's like, look, here's the thing I've learned. You're the bad guy. And as the bad guy, because I was one, you're never going to win. Andrew is so stupid. He does all the wrong things, and yet somehow he continues to win. So, yeah, I'm just going to kill you guys because that'll make me the good guy against your bad guys. So she's about to do that. Charles comes in, tries to swing an axe at Mary, and she's like, are you serious? Like, they're trying to destroy the world, man, and you're trying to kill me? It's not going to work, first off, because you're an idiot, but at the same point, just, like, get out of here. But that gives just enough time for Lilith to get up and attack Mary, and she actually does have the power. Kane is focused on finishing the spell, and Andrew's like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So they start fighting each other. Debbie busts in, tries to cut off Kane's head with a sword, and he's just like, that's not going to work. I am immortal. Like, you think just cutting my head's off enough? So as everyone's fighting with their match, Mary calls out to Andrew like, hey, like I said, this place was a prison for Kane. Get him upstairs. Get him into the prison. Like, down here is not enough for him. So they just launch up through the floor and end up in this different room. Andrew's a little bit out of energy, and Kane's like, all right, well, you know what? I'm here. I'm going to kill you. And then all of a sudden a voice speaks out. And he's like, Kane, son of Adam, brother of Abel. Turns out it's Lucifer, and he's here to judge Kane finally. He's like, I've been waiting so long for this. You're a dick, and I hate you. And so he judges him and says, like, you have the curse, the mark of Cain. You transferred it over to Andrew for a while there, but now it's back onto you because, like, you were always Cain. And so, yeah, you are now sentenced to live forever within the walls of the House of Mystery, and you will suffer, and I get to watch. Lucky me. So Kane's off the table. He's taken care of. Andrew goes back down. He sees Mary fighting off against Lilith still. And he goes and talks to the Keeper, and the Keeper's like, there's no way to undo the spell. The only way to do it is to sacrifice the flesh of the one who opened the portal, which was me. And then Mishkin, the dog, just pushes him into the portal, and he disintegrates immediately. So the portal starts closing up. Lilith starts being drained out of Tig again, so she's just back to normal. Portal closes. The brick of Babylon just shatters to the ground. And everything's back to normal. So at this point, Mary's still there. Charles is like, okay, well, you know, I'm kind of involved in that stuff, and I think you want to kill me, so I'm out. And he just uses a teleportation spell to disappear. And everyone walks outside. Constantine's like, oh, hey, you guys stopped the end of the world? And they're like, yep, nope, not happening today. He's like, great, cool. Tig, hey, you're still a vampire. You gonna go around killing people? And she's like, yeah, you know it. And she just runs off. And Constantine's like, all right, well, screw it. That's Andrew's problem. I'm not going to deal with that. And so he just goes back into his house and just walks away. Like, he's like, yeah, no, this isn't my problem anymore. Andrew can deal with all the other stuff. So at this point, Mary turns to Andrew and points out, like, yeah, here's the thing. I was only able to come back because there was a portal between heaven and hell opened. I'm not able to stick around. Like, I'm actually dead, unlike you, who just seems to have infinite amount of lives. And they share a moment, and it's like, yeah, you know what? You didn't make me a monster, but I was a monster regardless, and I love you. And he says, I love you back. They embrace in a kiss as she just fades away. So at that point, Andrew's not doing so hot. Debbie comes up, consoles him, and it's just like, well, you know, there are two vampires out there still. I guess we have to go kill them. And Debbie's like, it's just two vampires. How much problem could they really cause? And Mishkin is still a vampire dog as well, but he's a good dog, so he's not attacking them anymore. And that's the story. We do get the framing device, though, from Sorrentino of we have Mary at the very beginning, basically upset that Andrew abandoned her way back, and this is in 1592. He's upset that Andrew abandoned her and left her in the homestead of his father, who was a very abusive towards her, to the point of like sexual abuse. And one day Andrew shows up and says like, oh, my sweet, my Mary, I've returned. And he says, don't fear him. And Mary's like, fear you? I hate you. You abandoned me. You left me to your father. He did horrible things. You're a coward. And he's like, no, Mary, I'm not a coward. I'm a monster. And he reveals himself to Mary, and Mary's like, oh my God, my curses work. Ever since you abandoned me, I just hoped that you would like turn into a monster. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I abandoned you because I was a monster. And he goes in and he kisses Mary, and she's like, oh, you've never done that before. You've never shown your love. And he's like, yeah, no, the real me has been released, and I'd like to release you as well. So then at the very end of the story here, we get the final part of the thing where they've already turned her, and she's like, I have been through so much, and you have released me. You've let me be who I am, but like, I'm not the monster here. They're the monsters. They're the ones who have done these horrible things, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to like make sure that they're taking, these humans, they're the ones who need to be taken care of and reined in. So she disappears, and Andrew's like, no, Mary, wait. And we see Andrew arriving back home at his father's stead, and his father's head is just cut off on a silver platter, and it has the note in there that says rapist pig's dinner, and just end of story. That's the final shot. I'm going to miss this book so damn much. Do I think it perfectly stuck the landing? No. I think it built up this whole thing of the heaven and hell, and it just felt like it was taken care of a bit too quick. But I do appreciate the fact that they're leaving the door open for, there's still 2 vampires out there, so it makes sense that more vampires could come from that. It felt like the Mary thing was, like, the whole arc was going from, you know, they were lovers, they were torn apart because Mary was doing evil things, and then at the end they reunited. It felt tragic, but I loved it. I loved every second of it. And Deb coming in there at the end also felt like an interesting character addition. John dying, that was heartbreaking. I just love this whole story. I think that iVampire is by far one of the least appreciated books out of the New 52. I really can't complain about almost anything out of it. And I love having Sorrentino's art back on this final issue. Just fantastic. Not that Blanco did a bad job. Blanco did a great job, but it's always nice to have the original back. So yeah, overall, I'm going to give this issue in particularly an 8.5, but the series as a whole, I'm going to give like a 9 to a 9.5. I really enjoyed it felt cohesive the whole way through, like it was one long arc. The art was fantastic. The writing quality, just the quips from the characters, funny and heartwarming throughout. Fantastic series. Definitely check it out. Justice League Dark number 19, written by Jeff Lemire and Ray Fawkes, art by Mikel Janin. So this is the beginning of a new arc after the Books of Magic one from last time. This is called Horror City, and we pick up with Constantine at a horse race. He is placing a bet on a horse that's got like 100 to 1 odds, and he's like, yep, nope, this is what I'm here for. I'm trying to make some sacrifices. I'm just going to give up some money for this. And then wouldn't you know it, the horse wins on 100 to 1 odds. And he looks at this guy. He's like, oh, come on, I'm trying to lose here. I'm trying not to be me. So he goes to the stand and he's like, yeah, okay, here, just cash out then. I'll take it in hundreds. And as he goes to the stand, the woman passes back a note that says, the cold flame burns. And then all of a sudden, the entire racetrack just explodes with Constantine in it. So then we cut to Argus headquarters where Steve Trevor is there, and there's some big guy shows up with a cheeseburger. He's like, hey, Steve, it's me, your old friend from college. Let's have lunch. And he's like, I don't know. Oh, wait, hold on. You're Dead Man, aren't you? And Dead Man inside this guy's body is like, yeah, no, I really like triple cheeseburgers. And I just saw this guy, so I figured, why not? And Trevor's like, all right, here's the thing. You got my message. I want you to spy on the Justice League Dark for me. I want you to be like the informant for us. And he's like, yeah, we really hate the name Justice League Dark. It doesn't really make any sense with our characters, but you know, why would I help you? And Trevor basically says, like, if you help me, I will get you into the Justice League of America. And he's like, JLA, like, oh, what do I, oh, hold on. I'm getting a psychic thing. peace, I'm out. And so he flies away, and Trevor's like, God damn, fine, whatever, just be back. So then we cut to Xanadu's place. Frankenstein is already there. And she's like, hey, Frankenstein, if you just wait like 30 seconds, Dead Man will show up. And then in like 2 more minutes, Constantine will show up with the big news. And Frankenstein's like, that's really creepy that you do that. I'm not a huge fan of that. And then Dead Man pops in just being like, oh, hey, Xanadu, you're looking even younger than you did before. And she's like, yeah, no, something about the Books of Magic arc just kind of rejuvenated me, even younger than I was. And he's like, so what you doing this Saturday? You looking for a date? And at that point, Constantine busts in. He's just like, hey, everyone, start freaking out. I lost the House of Mysteries. Someone stole it from me. And he's like, what? How do you steal a house? Isn't that thing like linked to you psychically? And it's like, yeah, okay, here's the thing. And then Xanadu busting gives the whole backstory of he needs to be like aware of it. He needs to have a psychic connection to it like consciously. And during the moment where the racetrack exploded, he panicked and put up a spell to protect himself. And in that exact moment where he panicked, they stole the House of Mystery away, they being the cult of the Cold Flame. And Xanadu says, and you need to get it back within 24 hours or else you lose it forever, right? And John's like, yeah, that's everything. Thanks, Xanadu. Real helpful. So at that point, he's like, all right, well, if you know all this, if you know it's the cult of the Cold Flame, can you just like look them up and figure out where my house is right now? And Xanadu's like, no, I can't. It's all a bit blurry. I can't see that far. And he's like, all right, cool, great. Well, here's the thing. The house is still made of wood. And if there's one guy I know that can track down wood, it's Swamp Thing. I'm going to summon him real quick. And so he draws a circle and summons Swamp Thing. And he's like, oh, Jesus, that hurt. Who summoned me? Constantine's like, hi, it was me. Can you find my house? And he's like, I swear to God, Constantine, you're a dick. Why would I ever help you? And he's like, because, like, if this cult controls the House of Mystery, they can cause an apocalyptic level of horror. So maybe find that for me. And Swamp Thing looks over at Frankenstein. He's like, hey, Frankenstein, in my Rot World event, me and you were friends, but that was in an alternate future that didn't happen. So if you vouch for Constantine, I'll believe you. And Frankenstein's like, sure, yeah, I vouch for him. What about alternate future? And Swamp Thing's like, never mind. All right, fine, I'll find your house. So he looks into the green. He finds the house. And he's like, okay, I see it, but like, there's something dark here that's infecting your house. And then all of a sudden, Swamp Thing starts screaming out in agony. And it's just like shrivels away. And Xanadu's like, okay. Apparently, Constantine has now led Swamp Thing into a trap. And the nightmares have been released. And Dead Man's like, what do you mean nightmares? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, we see across, like everywhere in this huge city, nightmares have just started unleashing on all the citizens. There's like skeletons and snakes and blood and explosions and fires and stuff like that. And Xanadu, before everyone is like Thanos snapped away, turns to Frankenstein and says, hey, here's the thing. You're going to meet the Cold Flame, and when the lightning comes, you make it your friend. Got it? So then we see Constantine. He ends up in an alleyway. He starts coughing up blood, and the blood turns into a grotesque version of himself that starts attacking him. Dead Man ends up in Madison Square Garden, and he is assaulted by the torturous tents of the Cannibal Carnival. Xanadu ends up in a graveyard where the dead start coming out of their graves, but it turns out it's not just any dead, it's all of her lovers from over the centuries and how they died for her. And she's like, oh no, I was hoping I would never have to deal with this. And then Frankenstein wakes up in a sewer, and he's like, oh man, I hate teleporting. And he comes across his ex-wife, his bride, being disemboweled by their spawn, their son. And so this is the only one that continues on. He proceeds to fight it, his son, and he's like, oh, I must kill you, my son. And he pulls out his gun. Gun is knocked away by his son. Son grabs his sword and is about to impale Frankenstein, when all of a sudden the Flash comes in, and he's like, okay, what's going on with you monsters here? And he's like, oh wait, you're the Lightning. Okay, I'll deal with you. But then we cut over to Fifth Avenue, where the House of Mystery actually is posed at. And we see this creepy, shadowy figure walking through, and he's like, ah, yes, this house will be my servant. And he turns the members of the house into his agents, and he sends them out to do his bidding. And then we see Swamp Thing is strapped to the wall of the House of Mystery. And he's like, ah, yes, the elemental. You'll power my abilities. And Swamp Thing's like, you're just another monster. They'll stop you. And he's like, yeah, but I got my Dreamstone to stop them. And I've seen this House of Mystery many times in my dreams. And it plays a key part in the war that is coming. Because I am Dr. Destiny. And I will change the outcome of this war to my benefit. The father of New Earth. So Dr. Destiny, that's kind of a big pull, I think. Causing nightmares all over the world. I mean, yeah, it seems like pretty basic what he would do. I'm interested in it, but I kind of wish that it was less nightmares, because it feels like how much of it's actually happening, you know? Because they get teleported and they're having to face down their stuff, so maybe it is real. Because, I mean, the Flash is there, so it makes sense that it's real. But at the same time, it also feels like one of those things that's so hypermassive that it can't possibly stick. I don't know. I just want to see what's actually going to come out of it. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it just a flat 7 for now. You know what? 7.5. I'm going to give that extra 0.5 because Mikel Janon's art for Dr. Destiny is fantastic. He looks horrifyingly creepy, and I love it. So yeah, 7.5. I'm enjoying where it's going, and I want to see where it ends up next. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this April 24th, 2013. And despite the fact that it is the final issue of iVampire, I guarantee you I will find a way to work it in at least once a month. I'll bring it up. I love it. It's the best. If there were actual merchandise for iVampire, I would buy it. But lo and behold, nobody but me cares about that series, and I am so alone. Anyway, let's talk about the comics coming out next week, because next week, Geoff Johns decided to finally get on a schedule. So we have the number 20 issues of Batwing, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Green Arrow, Stormwatch, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. We have the number 12 issues of Dial H, World's Finest, and Earth 2. We have the 8th issue of Phantom Stranger. We have the first issue of The Movement, written by Gail Simone, part of a duo series with Green Team coming out later. And most importantly, why I said Geoff Johns is Geoff Johns' Aquaman number 19, which should have come out at some point this month, finally decides to come out that week. So better late than never, I guess. But yeah, that's basically all that's really going on. In terms of your stuff, hey, do you have a comment? Do you have something you'd like to share with the class? By all means, hit us up on Twitter or Discord or Reddit or Patreon for you high rollers. All the links to that in the description and or on screen for like half of it. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this content. Be sure to give it likes and stars and whatever positive endorphin rush thingies you can throw my way. But yeah, hope to see you next time. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.